D.C., where we're joined by three-time presidential candidate, consumer activist, and author Ralph Nader. He's called for impeaching Trump for deliberately abetting the climate crisis, among other issues. His latest book, written with Mark Green, is titled Fake President: Decoding Trump's Gaslighting, Corruption, and General BS, except he spells it out. Welcome back to Democracy Now!, Ralph. So first, respond to what is happening this week. It is historic. What do you think about the grounds on which President Trump is about to be impeached?
Far too narrow and perilous. If Nancy Pelosi wants to remove Donald Trump, she went on a very narrow base. She is clearly not supportive of impeachment generally. She took it off the table when it was proposed to her in 2007, the impeachment of the war criminals, George Bush and Dick Cheney. And she's come forward with a very narrow hand for the most impeachable president of all time. To go forward on the Ukraine, important as that is, because it affects interference in the upcoming election by Trump, soliciting foreign aid into interference, not just the Ukraine effort. He's actually said China, Russia, help him. But just think of all the other impeachable offenses, some of them per se, that are kitchen table offenses. He's destroyed, shredded, disabled the life-saving, injury prevention, and disease reduction programs of the federal government, Environmental Protection Agency, the OSHA, protecting worker safety, the Product Safety Commission. He's basically closed down the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, protection from Wall Street and other financial crimes against ordinary people, consumers, investors, small savers. That is a critical impeachable offense, according to the framers of our Constitution. The defiant refusal to faithfully execute the laws. She didn't go with that. The enrichment of his family with foreign governments using his hotels, the so-called emoluments clause, slam dunk per se. She didn't go with that. The seizure of the power of the purse, the appropriations power of the Congress, exclusively reserved to the Congress by the Constitution. She didn't go with that. He took $3.7 billion from the Defense Department to build the wall. That's a clear impeachable offense. It even gets worse, Amy. A month ago or so, Speaker Pelosi came to a press conference and said decisively that he committed bribery, said well documented, and she dropped the bribery impeachable clause. The whole obstruction of Congress is restricted largely to the Ukraine investigation, when he has the broadest contempt of Congress of any president, including, by the way, armed force in 9 countries overseas without any congressional declaration of war. And there is more as well. So the question is, why the Democrats didn't take a stronger stand and go with a strong hand that would have sharply increased public opinion because of the kitchen table issues, the health and safety and economic situations that he has fostered. Just look, average life expectancy is down. Productivity of labor is down. Manufacturing employment is down under Trump. These are not impeachable offenses, but the point is that he's vulnerable on these points, and he's a lying machine. I always thought that Alexander Hamilton's definition, one of his definitions of high crimes and misdemeanors, was the abuse of the public trust. Consider this. He is a sexual predator. Where's Congress on that? They got rid of Franken and John Conyers for 1% of what Trump has done. He's embroiled in all kinds of lawsuits by women who have sworn under oath that he's assaulted them, harassed them, etc. Then you have the bigotry and the racism, which he follows up with. I mean, his policies come down very hard on minority and the poor. And then you have his incitement to violence. If he's impeached, civil war, there'll be riots in the street. And then you cluster those under serial lying. He lies by the hour, lies by the day. He's averaging 22 lies, over 14,000 since he came into office. And you have an abuse of the public trust. People understand that. They don't want to have neighbors. They don't want to raise their children with this kind of model in the White House: lying, misogyny, racism, incitement to violence. So she has forfeited a huge opportunity, not just to impeach Trump, but to remove him. What's the point of just impeaching him if you don't use the full arsenal of impeachable offenses? And what a lot of people don't know, I've been down on Capitol Hill, and most of the Democratic members of the House Judiciary Committee opposed her narrow approach, but they were overruled. They were even backed by the chair of the Foreign Relations Committee, Mr. Engel, by the chair of the Financial Committee, Congresswoman Maxine Waters. The obstruction of justice in the Mueller report, where he had about 10 documented obstruction of justices, that was even supported by her deputy, the number 2 person, Steny Hoyer from Maryland. So she overruled them all. And as a result, I don't think she's protecting those 10 or 12 new members of Congress from Trump. He's going after them already. And he's crowing. He's taunting her. He's saying Nancy Pelosi has the majority in the House, and she didn't go forward with all these charges. And don't you know why? Because they're all lies. They're all fake. That's why. I've done nothing wrong. So he's taunting her, and he will do it before hundreds of thousands of people in his rallies in the coming months. A huge lost opportunity.
Ralph Nader, you also wrote a column saying Trump should be impeached for his climate policy alone as we come out of this COP25, this UN climate summit in Madrid, that has been called a monumental failure, with many blaming it partially on the United States, even though the climate-denying President Trump is pulling the U.S. out of the accord, not before they helped water down these negotiations.
Well, he's done a lot worse. He's completely unleashed the fossil fuel industry, drilling in the Arctic, drilling overseas, drilling on the shores. He's unleashed these massive greenhouse gases. He had an opportunity as president either to ignore climate disruption, and climate change should never be used. It's climate crisis, climate violence, climate disruption. We've got to use the right words here. He could have ignored it. He could have worked to diminish greenhouse gases. Instead, he's actually expanding greenhouse gases. Now, the Pentagon years ago declared climate disruption as a national security danger, and they continue to do so. Even the Federal Reserve is beginning to speak up on this. But Donald Trump calls it a hoax. He calls it a Chinese plot. This is instability. This is a psychiatric problem. This is a president who does not defend our country against a fossil fuel unleashed, ravaging nature with massive droughts and massive floods and ocean currents beginning to change and melting glaciers and all kinds of critical assaults on the security of the United States and its people, on farmers, on the poor, on the shore, all of that. And that's not an impeachable offense? I mean, what's the Congress up to here?
Well,
we're dealing here. Yes.
Let me ask you, even